The first time my family begged outside my penthouse, I was standing barefoot on heated marble floors, holding a cup of coffee I had forgotten to drink. It was raining hard in downtown Chicago, the kind of cold rain that turns car headlights into long silver lines on the pavement. From the 32nd floor, I could see the private entrance below, the black awning, the doorman in his coat, and four familiar figures crowded near the glass doors like they belonged there. My father, Richard Mitchell, was waving his hands in the air. My mother, Elaine, had one hand pressed to her chest and the other wrapped around her phone. My older sister, Celeste, stood under a designer umbrella, furious that the rain was touching her shoes, and beside her was Darren, her husband, looking around like someone might recognize him and embarrass him. They were not there because they missed me. They were there because the lease on Mitchell's Table, my family's restaurant, had been terminated. Their bank line had been frozen, their emergency loan had fallen apart, and somehow, after 10 years of silence, they had discovered that the woman who could stop everything from collapsing was the daughter they had kicked out on her birthday. Me. My name is Nora Mitchell. I was 34 years old when my family showed up beneath my building, begging to be let in. 10 years earlier, on my 24th birthday, they told me I was dead weight. My father said I contributed nothing. My mother said my sister needed my bedroom more than I did because Celeste was building a real life. Celeste smiled while I packed my clothes into trash bags in the garage. Now they were standing outside a penthouse they could not enter, begging for help from the woman they once threw away. The strange part was, I did not feel powerful in that moment. I did not feel happy. I did not even feel angry. I just felt still. If you have ever been the person your family only remembers when they need something, then you will understand why that silence felt heavier than any scream. And before I tell you what happened when I finally came downstairs, let me take you back to where it really started. If this story sounds familiar to your own life, stay with me, because sometimes the people who call you selfish are the same ones who built their comfort out of your sacrifice. My family owned a restaurant in the suburbs called Mitchell's Table. It had dark wood booths, brass lights over every table, framed black and white photos of my grandfather near the entrance, and a kitchen that always smelled like garlic, fryer oil, and stress. To outsiders, it looked like a family legacy. To me, it felt like a second house where I was expected to work but never allowed to belong. My father, Richard, ran the restaurant like it was proof that he mattered. He liked shaking hands with customers and telling stories about how his father started with nothing. He liked wearing pressed shirts and standing near the host stand like a man in control. But behind the office door, he was different. Bills made him sharp. Mistakes made him cruel. If a vendor called twice, he blamed whoever was closest. Most of the time, that was me. My mother, Elaine, treated the restaurant like our family crown. She cared about appearances more than numbers. The tablecloths had to be clean, the flowers had to be fresh, and people had to believe the Mitchell family was respectable, successful, and close. We were not close, we were arranged. Then there was my sister, Celeste. Celeste was 3 years older than me, beautiful in a way people noticed immediately. She had perfect hair, bright laughter, and the talent of making every room turn toward her. My parents called her sensitive, gifted, special. When Celeste cried, the whole house changed direction. When I cried, my mother told me not to be dramatic. Celeste was not a monster. I want to be fair about that. She could be charming. She could be funny. She knew exactly when to hug my mother, when to praise my father, and when to look helpless enough that someone else would clean up the mess. Usually, that someone was me. I was the dependable daughter. That was the name they gave me when they wanted something but did not want to say thank you. I cleaned tables on weekends. I folded napkins after school. I counted receipts in the back office before I was old enough to understand half the numbers. If a server called out, I filled in. If my father forgot an invoice, I found it. If my mother needed someone to pick up Celeste's dress, drive Celeste to an appointment, or cover Celeste's shift, she called me. And if I ever said I was tired, my father would look at me like I had insulted him. "Tired?" he would say. "You don't know what tired is." Celeste was allowed to need rest. I was expected to need less. That was the rule in our house, even if no one ever said it out loud. By the time Darren came into the family, that rule had hardened into something permanent. Darren came from money. Not huge money, but enough that my mother started sitting straighter when his parents were around. Enough that Celeste's engagement became the family's new project. Enough that I could feel myself being moved further and further into the background. Elaine wanted Celeste to look like the daughter who married up. Richard wanted Darren's family to see Mitchell's table as a smart investment. And I was expected to keep everything running quietly, so the picture looked better than the truth. The truth was that our home was never warm. It was a place of comparison, image, and careful silence. Love was not given freely. It was handed out like a tip after good service. If I helped, I was tolerated. If I asked for help, I was selfish. For years, I thought that was normal. I thought every family had one daughter who carried the heavy things, while everyone else smiled for the photos. I thought maybe if I worked hard enough, stayed quiet enough, gave enough, they would finally look at me and say, "Nora, we see you." They never did. And by the year I turned 24, Mitchell's table was in more trouble than anyone wanted to admit. Vendors were calling. The credit cards were stretched thin. My father's temper lived in every room of the house. My mother polished the silverware like appearances could pay invoices. They needed someone to blame, and in my family, that had always been me. That pattern did not begin when I was 24. It had been trained into me for years. In high school, I missed homecoming because my father needed help during a Saturday dinner rush. I remember standing in the restaurant bathroom, still wearing black slacks and a white button-down shirt, scrolling through photos of girls from my class in dresses I had helped them pick out during lunch. My mother knocked on the door and said, "Nora, stop hiding. Table 12 needs water." That was how it always went. Celeste had memories. I had responsibilities. When Celeste wanted to join a summer theater program, my parents found the money. When I asked about a weekend accounting workshop at the community college, my father frowned at the flyer and said, "You already know enough numbers to help me here." When Celeste moved into an apartment near campus, my mother cried because her baby was becoming independent. When I started college and kept living at home to save money, Elaine called it practical. "Dorms are expensive," she said, folding Celeste's laundry at the kitchen table. "Besides, your father needs you close." Close meant available. Close meant unpaid. Close meant if a dishwasher quit, I was called before a replacement was hired. If the hostess got sick, I missed class. If Celeste needed my car because hers was making a weird sound, I handed over the keys and took the bus. Celeste borrowed everything like it was already half hers. Clothes, shoes, cash, my good winter coat, my laptop charger, even my birthday gift cards. When I asked for something back, she would stare at me with wounded eyes and say, "Why are you always so weird about stuff?" Then my mother would step in. "Nora, don't be petty, she's your sister." Petty. That word followed me around the house like a smell I could not wash off. If Celeste forgot to pay me back, I was petty. If I asked why she got new furniture for her apartment while I was still sleeping on a mattress with a broken frame, I was jealous. If I said I could not cover a shift because I had an exam, I was selfish. My father believed Celeste's tears faster than he believed my receipts. Once, $200 went missing from the small cash drawer in the restaurant office. I had not even been working that night, but Richard called me into the office and shut the door. "Did you borrow money and forget to write it down?" he asked. I stared at him. No. He leaned back in his chair and sighed like I had disappointed him by existing. "Nora, this family only works if we're honest." 2 days later, Celeste admitted she had taken it for a last-minute dress because Darren invited her to a dinner with his parents. My mother said, "She panicked." It happens. Nobody apologized to me. That was when I started saving proof. Not because I was planning some grand revenge, not because I wanted to destroy anyone. I saved things because I was tired of being the only person in the room with a memory. At the restaurant, I noticed problems before anyone else did. Vendor invoices sat unopened under menus. Tax notices appeared in the office drawer, folded once and ignored. Credit card statements came with red warnings. The freezer needed repairs we could not afford, and my father kept pretending it was normal for suppliers to call twice a day. When I warned him, he snapped. "You think you know everything because you took a few classes? I'm just saying the numbers don't match the deposits, I told him. He pointed toward the dining room. Then go do something useful and refill the bread baskets. Celeste, meanwhile, had opinions about everything and responsibility for nothing. She decided Mitchell's table needed a remodel. New lighting, new chairs, a more elevated menu. Elaine loved the idea because Darren's parents might invest if the place looked more modern. My father hated the cost, but liked the attention. I was expected to help coordinate it. For free. I compared supplier quotes, tracked delivery dates, cleaned after painters, and stayed until midnight scraping old adhesive off the hostess station. Celeste posted a photo online with the caption, "So proud to help refresh our family legacy." I remember looking at that post with my hands still rough from cleaning solution. She got 87 likes. I got a cracked nail and a lecture for forgetting to restock lemons. Birthdays were the hardest because they exposed the truth in such a small, humiliating way. One year, my mother brought home a cake with Celeste's name on it because she had picked it up after a bridal appointment and just got distracted. Another year, my father left my dinner early because Celeste called crying after an argument with Darren over centerpiece colors. I sat alone at the kitchen table with one candle burning down into grocery store frosting. Still, I hoped. That is the part I am almost embarrassed to admit. I was not cold back then. I was not strong in the way people imagine. I still wanted my parents to look at me with pride. I still wanted Celeste to treat me like a sister instead of spare parts. I still thought love could be earned if I just found the right amount of useful. What they did not know was that while they were using me, I was quietly learning how to build a life they could not touch. At night, after closing the restaurant, I studied accounting at the kitchen table with headphones in. I took online real estate courses when everyone else was asleep. I helped small business owners organize receipts and prepare budgets for tiny fees. Nothing glamorous, nothing loud. But I was good at it. I could look at a failing business and see where the money was bleeding out. I could read a lease and spot a clause that would become a problem later. I could take a stack of messy invoices and turn it into a story the numbers had been trying to tell. My family mocked it. Richard once saw a commercial real estate textbook in my bag and laughed. Real estate is for people with capital, Nora, not girls with spreadsheets. Celeste smiled from the couch and said, "Maybe start with finding a boyfriend before you start building an empire." I did not answer. I just kept learning. My first real break came from a supplier named Ben, who delivered specialty produce to the restaurant. He noticed me correcting an invoice one afternoon and said, "You're sharper than half the owners I deal with." A week later, he introduced me to Margaret Hale, a widowed property investor who owned several mixed-use buildings around Chicago. She needed someone to audit tenant reports and organize financial files. I expected her to dismiss me after one meeting. She did not. Margaret looked over my sample work, tapped the page with one polished finger, and said, "You see patterns. That's rare." No one had ever said something like that to me before. For the first time, my carefulness was not treated like anxiety. My memory was not called dramatic. My attention to detail was not used against me. Margaret paid me fairly, corrected me directly, and trusted me with real responsibility. Under her, I learned commercial leases, tenant defaults, maintenance charges, operating statements, and how businesses survive or fail long before the public notices. I also learned to protect myself. I kept emails, I kept receipts, I kept records of the money I had covered at Mitchell's table and the hours I had worked without pay. Not to attack my family, to protect the truth. Then, a few weeks before my 24th birthday, Margaret offered me a full-time position. It was not just a job. It was a door. Taking it meant I could no longer be available whenever my father called. It meant I could not cover Celeste's chaos, rescue the restaurant for free, or pretend my life had no direction. I decided I would tell my family at my birthday dinner. Some foolish, tender part of me still believed they might be proud. I had no idea they had already made another plan for me. Margaret Hale did not become important to me because she saved me. She became important because she saw me before I knew how to see myself. She was in her early 60s then, with silver hair cut neatly at her jaw and a way of speaking that made people stop interrupting. Her office smelled like black coffee, paper files, and the lemon soap she kept beside the sink. Everything on her desk had a place. Every folder had a label. Every number had to make sense before she trusted it. The first month I worked with her, I apologized constantly. Sorry, I had one question. Sorry, I just wanted to check this. Sorry, I stayed late to finish the report. One afternoon, Margaret looked up from a lease agreement and said, Nora, why do you apologize before you take up space? I froze with a pen in my hand. Nobody in my family had ever asked me something that directly. They corrected me, used me, compared me, but they never noticed the small ways I had learned to shrink. I don't know, I said. Margaret leaned back in her chair. Then start noticing. That was how she taught me, not with soft speeches, but with practical truths that stayed in my head. She taught me to open separate accounts, to keep business and family money apart, to read every contract twice, to save emails, to stop answering every phone call like it was an emergency just because someone else refused to plan. Loyalty is not the same as surrender, she told me once, sliding a folder across the desk. Don't confuse the two. Through Margaret, I met Alicia Reed, a real estate attorney who wore simple suits, carried legal pads everywhere, and had the calmest voice I had ever heard. Alicia helped Margaret with property contracts, tenant disputes, and commercial leases. She was direct, but never unkind. The first time Alicia reviewed one of my reports, she said, "You have good instincts, but instincts need documentation." That sentence changed me. At home, documentation was treated like betrayal. If I kept proof, I was holding grudges. If I remembered details, I was bringing up the past. If I corrected a lie, I was making trouble. But in Margaret's world, records were not cruelty. They were protection. Still, even with Margaret and Alicia in my corner, I was not brave all at once. I still checked my phone every time it buzzed. I still felt guilty if my father needed help at the restaurant and I did not answer immediately. I still believed some part of being a good daughter meant being available, until there was nothing left of me. A few days before my 24th birthday, Margaret invited me to lunch. "Just something small," she said. "You deserve to be celebrated." I almost told her no. My family was having dinner for me at Mitchell's table that night, and some childish part of me wanted to keep my birthday untouched for them. I wanted to believe they had planned something real. I wanted to believe my mother had ordered a cake with my name on it this time. Margaret must have seen the hesitation on my face. "Nora," she said gently, "people who only call you when they need labor are not the same as people who celebrate you." I looked down at my hands. The truth made me uncomfortable, because I already knew it. At lunch, she gave me a plain white envelope. Inside was a simple birthday card with one sentence written in her neat handwriting. "You are not hard to love." I read it 3 times in the restaurant booth and felt my throat close. I did not cry, because I had gotten very good at not crying in public. But I tucked that card into my purse like it was something fragile. That evening, I went home and got ready for my family dinner. I wore a navy dress I had bought on clearance, the kind of dress that made me feel put together without trying too hard. I curled my hair, put on small pearl earrings, and carried a small cake I had bought myself, because I did not want to risk disappointment again. When I pulled into the back lot of Mitchell's table, the kitchen lights were already glowing, rain had left dark patches on the pavement, and the dumpster near the side door smelled like wet cardboard. I sat in my car for a minute, holding the steering wheel, practicing how I would say it. "I accepted a full-time position. I won't be able to cover shifts anymore. I hope you can be happy for me." Those words sounded simple in the car. Inside the restaurant, they became heavy. My mother met me near the hostess stand, wearing her pearl necklace and the smile she used when guests were watching. "Oh good, you're early," she said. "Can you help set up the back table? We're short tonight." I looked down at my dress. "Mom, I'm here for dinner. It'll only take a minute." That was always the beginning. 1 minute became an hour. One favor became a responsibility. But that night, I wanted to start differently. "I'd rather not," I said carefully. "I want to just be here tonight." Elaine blinked, like I had spoken another language. Before she could answer, Celeste swept in with Darren and his parents behind her. Her engagement ring flashed under the warm lights, and my mother immediately turned away from me. "Oh, sweetheart, let me see it again," Elaine said, grabbing Celeste's hand. My birthday flowers were on the center table when I arrived. 10 minutes later, they had been moved to the hostess stand to make room for Celeste's wedding binder. I noticed everything. The folded napkins shaped like fans. The bottle of champagne chilling near Darren's parents. The overdue vendor notice half hidden beside the office printer. My father's tight jaw as his phone buzzed again and again. Then I heard Darren's father say quietly, "If we invest, Richard, we need stability. A family-run image matters." My stomach tightened. Dinner started, but it did not feel like mine. Celeste talked about wedding colors, venues, and how expensive everything was. Darren complained about rent. Elaine nodded along like every word was important. My father barely looked at me. Finally, when there was a pause, I touched the edge of my napkin and said, "I have some news too." Celeste smiled without looking at me. "Is it quick? Because I want to show Mom the reception layout." I swallowed. I accepted a full-time job with Hale Properties. For 1 second, no one spoke. Then my father set down his fork. "What do you mean full-time?" Before I could explain, Celeste gave a little laugh. "Wait, so who's going to help with the restaurant before the wedding?" "I won't be able to keep covering shifts," I said. "I can help with a transition, but I can't keep working unpaid." The word unpaid landed badly. Elaine's face tightened. Darren's mother looked at her plate. My father's eyes went cold. Celeste leaned back in her chair. "Wow. On your birthday, you decide to make everything about you." I stared at her. "It is my birthday." Nobody laughed. Then Elaine cleared her throat and said, "Actually, this is connected. Celeste and Darren need to save money before buying a house, and we've decided they'll move into the house for a while." I nodded slowly, waiting for the rest. "They'll need your room," my mother said. For a moment, I honestly thought I had misunderstood her. "My room? It's the largest after ours," Elaine said, too quickly. "And you're hardly home anyway." I looked at my father. "Where am I supposed to sleep?" He did not hesitate. "You're 24, Nora," he said. "Figure it out." For a few seconds after my father said that, I heard nothing but the restaurant noise around me. Forks against plates, ice shifting in glasses, a server laughing near the kitchen door because she did not know my life had just cracked open at table 6. I looked from my father to my mother, waiting for someone to correct him, waiting for Elaine to say, "Richard, not tonight," waiting for Celeste to say, "Nora, we should have talked to you first." Nobody did. My father wiped his mouth with his napkin, like he had made a normal announcement. "You'll move out tonight," he said. "Celeste and Darren can start bringing things over this weekend." My cheeks burned. Darren's parents sat across from me, stiff and silent, pretending to study their salads. My aunt and 2 cousins were at the far end of the table. A few regular customers glanced over, because Richard's voice carried when he wanted it to. I tried to keep my own voice steady. "You decided this without asking me?" Celeste sighed. "Nora, don't make a scene." "A scene?" I said. "I'm being told to leave my home during my birthday dinner." Elaine reached for my hand, but it was not comfort. It was control. "Honey, you've always been independent. Celeste and Darren are starting a marriage. They need support. I need a place to sleep." Darren leaned back, crossing his arms. "Most adults don't live with their parents forever." Something about his tone made my chest go cold. This man had known me for 4 years. He had eaten food I served, accepted favors I did for Celeste, watched me carry boxes for wedding samples and restaurant supplies. Now he spoke to me like I was an inconvenience taking up square footage. My father's eyes narrowed. "This is exactly what I mean. You want everyone to clap because you got some little office job, but when your family needs you, you act attacked." "I worked here for years without being paid." The table went quiet. Celeste gave a small laugh, sharp and fake. "Oh my God, here we go." Richard's face changed. He hated being challenged in front of people. He hated facts more when there were witnesses. "You lived under my roof," he said. "You ate my food. You used this family name. Don't sit there and pretend you were some victim." "I covered vendor deposits from my savings," I said. "I stayed after closing. I missed classes. You helped your family, Elaine interrupted, her smile trembling. That's what daughters do. No, I said softly. That's what unpaid employees do. Celeste pushed her chair back slightly. Maybe if you weren't so bitter, you'd have a life of your own by now. I looked at her then, really looked at her. Her perfect makeup, her ring catching the light, her hand resting on top of Darren's, like she was the one being wounded. And for the first time, I understood that she was not embarrassed by what was happening to me. She was enjoying it. My father stood. Not fully, just enough to make the table feel smaller. You can go home now, he said. Pack whatever you need. Leave your key on the kitchen counter before midnight. The silence after that sentence felt physical. Then he added, since you want to act like an outsider, live like one. My birthday cake sat untouched near the end of the table. The blue candle shaped like a number 4 had fallen sideways into the frosting. I remember noticing that because my mind needed something small to hold on to. I did not scream. I did not throw water. I did not beg them to love me in front of people who had already decided I was disposable. I stood up, walked to the back office, and closed the door behind me. My hands were shaking, but they still knew what to do. I opened the computer, printed the unpaid schedules I had kept, the vendor emails I had organized, and the list of emergency expenses I had covered with my own money. Then I placed the papers neatly on my father's desk, not as revenge, as a goodbye. When I got to the house, Celeste was already in my room with a measuring tape. She had Darren on speakerphone. I think the dresser can go, she said, looking at my furniture like it belonged to a hotel. And we can paint over this wall color. I stood in the doorway with my purse still on my shoulder. Celeste turned and smiled. Don't look like that, you heard Dad. I packed my life into black trash bags because there were no boxes. Elaine stood in the hall, twisting her pearl necklace between her fingers. Please don't make tonight ugly, she whispered. I almost laughed, not because it was funny, because she still thought the ugly part was my reaction. By midnight, I was sitting in my old car outside a closed gas station, rain tapping on the windshield, trash bags piled in the back seat. I had no apartment, no plan for that night, and no family to call. Then I remembered Margaret's birthday card. You are not hard to love. I held it in both hands until the paper bent. Then I called her. Margaret answered on the second ring. I tried to explain without crying, but my voice broke halfway through the first sentence. She did not ask me why I had waited. She did not say, "Are you sure it was that bad?" She simply gave me an address and said, "Come here now." Her guest room was warm, with clean sheets, a folded towel on the chair, and a small lamp glowing beside the bed. That kindness destroyed me more than the cruelty had. I sat on the edge of the mattress and cried so hard I could barely breathe. The next morning, Margaret made coffee and called Alicia Reed. Alicia arrived with a legal pad and that calm, steady voice of hers. She listened without interrupting. Then she said, "Nora, I know you're not thinking about legal issues right now, but people who rewrite the truth in private usually repeat the lie in public. Save everything." So I did. I saved the texts from Celeste telling me I was selfish. I saved the voicemail from my father saying I had embarrassed him. I saved photos of the trash bags in my car, the birthday cake receipt, and the unpaid work records I had printed from the restaurant office. Then I found the family group chat. Celeste had forgotten I was still in an older thread they had used for holiday plans. Weeks before my birthday, she had written, "Nora's room is wasted space. If we force her out, maybe she'll stop acting poor and finally do something." My mother had replied with 3 heart emojis. My father had written, "After her birthday, less drama." I stared at those words for a long time. After her birthday, less drama. That was the moment the last soft part of me stopped defending them. They had not snapped in anger. They had planned it. They had sat at dinner, watched me carry in my own cake, and already known I would be homeless before midnight. Alicia helped me organize everything. Emails showing I had warned Richard about unpaid invoices, bank transfers showing I had covered repairs, notes from vendors confirming I had handled calls my father ignored. "You may never need these," Alicia said, sliding the folder toward me, "but if they ever blame you for what they broke, you'll be ready." I blocked my family for 1 week, then 1 week became 1 month, Then 1 month became the first real silence I had ever owned. I moved into a tiny studio apartment with a radiator that clanked at night and a window facing a brick wall. It was not beautiful, but every inch of it was mine. Nobody measured my bedroom while I stood in the doorway. Nobody told me I should be grateful for the air I breathed. I started therapy through Margaret's employee benefits. I worked hard. I learned leases, defaults, tenant rights, operating statements, and how fragile businesses become when pride matters more than numbers. Years passed. I became an analyst, then a senior manager, then a partner. And when Hale and Stone Properties acquired a portfolio of distressed restaurant buildings almost 10 years later, one familiar address appeared in the file: Mitchell's Table. My family never saw my name on the documents. But I saw theirs, and this time, I did not look away. 10 years later, the rain outside my penthouse windows looked almost exactly like the rain on my windshield the night I slept in my car. Only now, I was not sitting outside a closed gas station with trash bags in the back seat. I was standing 32 floors above the city, looking down at the people who once told me to figure it out. Mitchell's Table had been in trouble for years. I knew that before my family ever found out I knew. Hale and Stone Properties had acquired the building as part of a distressed commercial portfolio. It included 5 restaurant spaces, 2 small retail units, and one address I had not expected to see again. When I saw Mitchell's Table in the file, I did not celebrate. I closed the folder, walked to the window, and stood there for a long time. Alicia reviewed everything twice. The lease was old, poorly negotiated, and already in default before we acquired the building. There were unpaid maintenance charges, late rent, ignored compliance notices, and financial statements that did not match the bank records. Hale and Stone offered cure periods. We offered payment plans. We sent certified letters. We scheduled calls. Richard ignored most of them. I was careful never to involve myself more than policy required. I did not want revenge dressed up as business, so every decision went through the same process any other tenant would face. That was important to me. The truth had to be clean. The lease termination went out on a Tuesday. By Friday, my family was outside my building. The doorman called my private line first. "Ms. Mitchell," he said carefully, "there are 4 people downstairs insisting they're your family." I already knew. I could see them from the window. My father was arguing with security. My mother was crying in a way that looked practiced even from 32 floors up. Celeste kept looking toward the street, angry and embarrassed. Darren stood behind her, pretending not to be part of it. For a moment, I considered not going down. Then my phone lit up. "Celeste, stop being dramatic and come fix this." I read the message twice. Not because it surprised me, but because it was so perfectly her. 10 years of silence, and she still thought I was a tool she could pick up when something broke. I called Alicia. Then I called Margaret. 20 minutes later, the 3 of us stepped out of the private elevator into the lobby. My father saw me first. He changed his face immediately. That was the part that almost made me laugh. The anger vanished. The entitlement softened. He opened his arms slightly, like we were in a movie where the daughter was supposed to run to him. "Nora," he said. "Sweetheart." He had not called me sweetheart since I was a child. My mother pressed a tissue under her eye. "Oh, honey, we have been trying to reach you." Celeste looked me up and down, taking in the tailored cream blouse, the black trousers, the simple gold watch, the keycard in my hand. "So this is where you live now?" she said. "Must be nice." I did not answer that. "This is Margaret Hale," I said. "And this is Alicia Reed, counsel for Hale and Stone." My father frowned. "We don't need lawyers, we need family." "No," Alicia said calmly. "You requested a meeting regarding a lease termination. That makes this a business matter." Richard's jaw tightened. He was not used to women correcting him in polished lobby lighting with security nearby. I led them into the conference room off the main floor. The walls were glass, but the door was solid. I wanted witnesses nearby, not a scene for strangers. There was a pitcher of water on the table, 6 chairs, and a folder already placed at the head. My family sat on one side, I sat on the other. For a few seconds, nobody spoke. Then my father leaned forward. "Nora, whatever happened in the past, this is still your family's restaurant." There it was, Not an apology, a claim. Elaine reached for my hand across the table. I moved mine just enough that she touched polished wood instead. We could lose everything, she whispered. Celeste's voice sharpened. And you knew? You knew this was happening and you just sat up here in your fancy apartment? I reviewed the file when it reached my desk, I said. Richard blinked. Your desk? I opened the folder. I'm a managing partner at Hale & Stone Properties. The room changed. It was not loud. Nobody gasped. Nobody shouted. But the air shifted so suddenly that even Darren looked up from his phone. My father stared at me like the words had come out in another language. That's not possible. Margaret's voice was quiet. It is. Alicia slid the ownership documents across the table, then the lease history, then the certified notices, then the unpaid charges. Each paper landed softly, but I watched them hit harder than any raised voice could have. Celeste's face lost color. You bought our restaurant? She said. No, I answered. Our company acquired the building. Your restaurant is a tenant in default. Richard grabbed one of the papers and scanned it too quickly to understand it. This is personal. It would be personal, I said, if I had skipped procedure. I didn't. You were offered extensions, payment plans, and compliance options. You ignored them. Elaine started crying harder. We didn't know it was you. That should not have mattered. My father slapped the paper down. You abandoned us. You walked out when the business needed you, and now you sit here judging me? I had known he would say it. Alicia had warned me he would say it. Still, hearing it pulled something old and bruised inside me. I opened the second folder. This one was mine. I placed a birthday group chat screenshots on the table first. Celeste's message about my room being wasted space. My mother's heart emojis. My father's words. After her birthday. Less drama. Elaine stopped crying. I placed the unpaid schedules beside them. The vendor emails. The bank transfers. The repair receipts. The warnings I had sent years before anyone outside the family knew Mitchell's table was bleeding money. I did not abandon the business, I said. I stopped carrying it for free after you threw me out. Celeste whispered, You saved all this? Yes. Why? I looked at her. Because I knew someday you would lie. For the first time, she had no answer. My mother covered her mouth. Nora, we were under pressure. So was I. Richard's voice dropped. You're really going to do this to your parents? I looked at him, then at Elaine, then at Celeste. For years, I had imagined this moment. I thought maybe I would shake, maybe I would cry, maybe I would finally list every wound and make them understand. But standing there, I realized I did not need them to understand. I only needed them to stop having access to me. Elaine said, But we're your parents. I nodded once. Parents do not throw their daughter out on her birthday and come back only when the daughter owns the door they need opened. The room went completely still. Richard looked down at the documents. His voice changed when he spoke again, smaller, less certain. Can you save the restaurant anyway? That was the question underneath everything. Not, can we make this right? Not, how did we hurt you? Not, what did it cost you to survive us? Just, can you save what we still want? No, I said. I won't reverse the termination. Elaine closed her eyes. I continued, because the truth deserved to be complete. Hale & Stone gave Mitchell's table multiple chances to cure the default. The deadlines passed. The bank has already reviewed the corrected financials. The emergency loan will not move forward because the statements you submitted do not match verified records. Darren muttered something under his breath. Celeste snapped. So that's it? You ruin us and act professional? I didn't ruin you, I said. I stopped protecting you from the consequences of your own decisions. The fallout did not happen all at once. Real life rarely collapses in one dramatic scene. It breaks in pieces. Mitchell's table stayed open for a short legal window, but the old confidence was gone. Vendors stopped extending credit. Staff members started leaving because they could feel the end coming. Darren's parents pulled away the moment the financial mess became embarrassing. Celeste's friends, the ones who had loved her polished version of the family legacy, began asking questions she could not answer, and the story they had told about me started cracking. Former employees remembered me. Vendors remembered me. A retired server named Paula told someone, Nora was the only reason that office made sense for years. Word spread in quiet, ordinary ways. Not viral. Not explosive. Just true. That was worse for them. My father had built his pride on being respected. Now people knew he had let the daughter who held the place together leave with trash bags on her birthday. My mother had built her image on being a devoted family woman. Now people knew she had helped plan my removal from my own room. Celeste had built her identity around being chosen. Now everyone could see what that choice had cost someone else. I did not feel joy watching it happen. That surprised me. I felt grief, clean, heavy grief. Because once, I had wanted Mitchell's table to survive. I had wanted my father to be proud. I had wanted my mother to look at me like I mattered. I had wanted Celeste to be my sister, but wanting something does not make it real. 2 weeks after the meeting, a cream envelope arrived at my office. My mother's handwriting was on the front. Inside was a letter asking to meet mother to daughter. I held it for a long time before opening my calendar. Because even then, I knew the consequences were not finished. Neither were the boundaries. I met my mother at a quiet cafe 3 blocks from my office. Not at my penthouse. Not at the restaurant. Not anywhere she could turn memory into leverage. Alicia had told me, no private promises. No money. No emotional contracts disguised as apologies. So I arrived with my own car, my own exit, and a calm I had worked 10 years to earn. Elaine was already there when I walked in. She looked smaller than I remembered, wearing a beige coat and the pearl necklace she used to twist whenever she wanted sympathy. There were 2 untouched coffees on the table. Nora, she said, standing too quickly. I did not hug her. I sat down. For a moment, she stared at me like she was searching for the daughter who used to apologize first. I'm sorry, she said, for how things happened. How things happened. Not for kicking me out. Not for planning it. Not for letting me pack trash bags on my birthday while my sister measured my room. I folded my hands around the warm coffee cup. Say what happened. Her eyes filled immediately. Your father was under so much pressure. The restaurant was failing. Celeste was about to get married. And you were always so strong. We thought you would land on your feet. There it was again. My strength used as permission. I looked at her and asked the question I had carried for 10 years. Did you know before my birthday that I was being removed from my room? Elaine looked down. The cafe noise seemed to fade around us. Finally, she whispered, yes. That one word did not shock me. I had already seen the messages, but hearing her admit it in person made something inside me settle. She kept crying. I thought daughters come back. I nodded slowly. I did come back, Mom, just not as the person you could use. Her face crumpled, but I did not reach for her. I had spent too many years comforting people who hurt me. I'm not trying to punish you, I said, but I will not fund Dad. I will not rescue Celeste. I will not reverse the lease. And I will not pretend my birthday was a misunderstanding. Nora, we're still family. Family is not a key you keep after you throw someone out. She had no answer for that. After the meeting, the messages started again. Celeste accused me of destroying everyone because I needed to feel superior. My father left a voicemail saying I would regret choosing money over blood. I saved both, then blocked them. Not because I was scared, because peace requires maintenance. I updated my building access list. I told security no unapproved family visits. I stopped reading every letter Elaine sent. Some stayed unopened in a drawer until I was ready. Some I threw away. Margaret asked me one evening, "What do you want your next birthday to look like?" I realized I had no idea. For most of my life, my birthday had been something I survived. So the next year, on my 35th birthday, I chose differently. I hosted dinner in my penthouse. Nothing extravagant. A long wooden table, candles in glass holders, roast chicken, warm bread, a chocolate cake from the bakery downstairs, and people who came because they loved me without needing anything first. Margaret sat to my right. Alicia sat across from me. 2 friends from work came with flowers. Paula, a former server from Mitchell's table, brought a bottle of wine and hugged me so tightly I almost cried. Nobody asked me to serve. Nobody forgot my name on the cake. Nobody made me earn my seat. At one point, I stepped away and looked out at the city. The same city that had once felt huge and cold when I had nowhere to sleep now glittered quietly beneath me. The penthouse was never the victory. The money was never the victory. Even the documents on that conference room table were not the victory. The victory was learning that being rejected by people who only loved my usefulness did not make me unlovable. It made me free to find people who knew the difference between love and control. I still grieve sometimes. I still think about the girl sitting outside that gas station with trash bags in her car and a birthday card in her hands. Healing did not erase her. Healing taught me to protect her. Years after my family kicked me out on my birthday, they begged outside my penthouse. But by then, I had already built something they could not take, a home inside myself. And they no longer had the key. If you have ever been treated like the disposable one in your family, I hope you remember this. Walking away does not mean you stopped loving them. Sometimes it means you finally started loving yourself. Share your story in the comments. Subscribe if this helped you feel less alone. And remember, people who only value your sacrifice do not get to define your worth.